Morning. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you to the World Hope Forum and especially Ambassador Barbara DeVries for honoring me with your invitation to keynote this extraordinary celebration of our future. Thank you all for welcoming me into your fold, and once again, good morning. How are you feeling? No mere passing greeting. That's the question I've been asking friends and family and colleagues and strangers this past year. Um, my mind is not calm, said one person, and I'm not sleeping well, said another. And indeed, the insurrection just was such a throwback. It put us all over the top, and I'm worried, fearful, furious, others have said. And you? How are you feeling this morning? We ask each other again after the not unprecedented and not unpredictable, but nevertheless unbelievable events of January 6th. In the United States. So no matter where we are in this troubled, glorious world of ours, we're all experiencing the stress of current events. How can we stare down the eye of the storm and emerge whole, true to ourselves, on wings that power our climb? That's the question for this morning. We're experiencing the transformational joy of having just inaugurated Kamala Harris, the first woman vice president of the United States, the first person of Asian and African descent, daughter of immigrants, dare we say, one of the few people to truly embody the American story is now in our leadership. America has been a latecomer, let's face it, where representation is concerned, despite all of its vaulted expressions of itself. But here, just days after the US inauguration, we are indeed ready for this inauguration of hope. And so I say to you again, good morning. It's a brand new day. And true, actually, there was something missing here. We were supposed to go to a video of me. And so I've written this around that video.
All my life I've been touched by history. A child of the civil rights era, I've lived the sting of current events. A journalist, I've chronicled our collective path for 30 years. A historian, I've put those events into perspective, into context of time and journeys and destinies, and known the power of history to cleanse and to heal. I was 10 when I met Dr. King at New York's Riverside Church. Because my aunt was a member of Riverside's professional choir, I had a front row seat when Dr. King spoke there, newly returned from the wars of Montgomery, where Rosa Parks had kept her historic seat, and a battalion of everyday people rose to the occasion by taking to their feet, maintaining a 385-day boycott that would launch the modern civil rights era, the fight for human rights in America needed to this day. I met Dr. King on the receiving line at Riverside. "And what are you doing for our people?" he asked. I told him my cousin and I and two others had desegregated New York City's schools. He told me that what I was doing was important. He then lifted my chin, awestruck as I was, and called me pretty. Growing up a child of the integration generation in those days, pretty and important were about as good as a Negro girl could hope to feel. So you could say I was raised by Dr. King. The next day, as my mother brushed my hair for school, I saw a different me in the mirror. At 8 years old, northern white parents had spat on me and screamed at me and torn my clothes for trespassing what they saw as turf and I saw as school. Now, touched by King, I felt cleansed. Yes, I was raised by Dr. King. His words liberated me and made me feel what every person, man, woman, child, wants to feel: validated, heard, understood. His touch, his caring, his generosity was also a charge, a life's mission, a gift of spirit for me to share with people I meet, with audiences everywhere I go, with you. That moment, that charge Dr. King gave a 10-year-old girl is the gift of spirit I share with audiences everywhere I go, in my lectures, in my books, in every experience. In this life, my grandmother said, all things are one. The gifts we are given are gifts for the common good, gifts to share. So we must walk the walk, talk the talk, live the life. In this world, too, said my grandfather, let no one contaminate your mind.
Thank you, Ragnar. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. Keep on a walking, keep on a talking, walking down the freedom trail. Ain't gonna let sexism turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let racism turn me round. Keep on a walking, keep on a talking, walking down the freedom trail. Ain't gonna let homophobia turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let Islamophobia turn me round. Keep on a walking, keep on a talking, walking down the freedom trail. Good morning indeed again. Good morning. And true to that civil rights song, how can we keep ourselves not turned around? How can we keep our eyes on the prize and our feet on the freedom trail? That's the challenge of change for those who dare. And as for our uncertainties, how do we thrive in a time of uncertainty? We thrive by understanding this fact. Every day, every time is a time of uncertainty. The trick of life is what we do about it. We meet it head on. We see uncertainty as possibility. We embrace uncertainty for what it is, opportunity, like the founding of the World Hope Forum. As a woman, as a journalist, historian, it's a thing I've lived, chronicled, studied. Uncertainty is indeed something Black people know well, especially here as we have just rounded year 400 of the African American experience. 2019 marked 400 years since the first documented boatload of Africans were forced to walk the plank enchained from freedom at home to enslavement in the Americas. And what have we learned since then? 400 plus years, and here we are again, 8 minutes and 46 seconds of watching a policeman murder George Floyd and police murder too many others. That is our state-sponsored terrorism in the United States. And that came to push back shouts of support our police. Yes, indeed, as Barbara said, January 6th was traumatizing for a lot of people, and especially for African Americans, because we did not learn. Racism and violence resurge with renewed vigor. America teeters on the abyss of its worst instincts again. We find ourselves sharing a collective feeling, not hopeless, but unhopeful, as Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote at the height of segregation from the depth of his soul. For we did not learn then either. Entitlement led to insurrection. More than 125 of America's 535 congressional leaders voted to not learn again. Will America, the world indeed, but I speak here from the United States, will America never get past the horror of its self-inflicted wounds? Will we never confront our history, atone for it, learn from it, grow so we can move on? Will our African American and indigenous ancestors never rest in peace? How we got over? My soul looks back and wonder how we got over, the hymn is sung. 400 plus years of the African American sojourn against the odds, how we got over. We did it with fierce determination to survive and thrive, with boundless courage, creativity, critical thinking, with tenacity, ingenuity, conscience, and the art of invention. Sometimes the art of inventing ourselves. 400 plus years of family, faith, friendship, love, joy, laughter, of possibility, of infinite achievements, collective and personal, how we got over indeed. 2021 marks 232 years of waiting for Kamala Harris to represent women at the highest rungs of American government. There are lessons to be taken from what we, not just as African Americans, but as friends the world over, have and have not learned across the centuries. The framers of the US Constitution, revered as it is, institutionalized terror, institutionalized what was the privilege of white men of property, institutionalized a government woefully inadequate to human rights for everyone else. So let's be honest. Let's cut to the chase. We need to go from the framers to a different frame of mind. There is in the Akan word of West Africa a word, in the Akan culture of West Africa, a word for it. Sankofa, it says. To go back, to go forward, one must go back. So we go back in commemoration. We go back in celebration. We go back in remembrance as we pay homage to the indigenous nations destroyed, their people made landless and homeless, to the estimated 100 million African men, women, and children whose lives were seized and devoured by American slavery. We go back that we may uplift our capacity for connection and collectivity, for understanding that we are all, through our sufferings and our joys, part of an infinite human whole. We go back in remembrance of the Native American genocide, the Armenian genocide, the ongoing struggle of their descendants and the reckoning due. We go back to the Holocaust that seized 11 million lives, among them 6 million Jews. As human beings, how can we not remember the children and families at the American border today? How can we not see in their feet their desire to come to America, their Mayflower, battered and worn by a sea of troubles, seeking safe harbor and a new world? And so we go back to go forward. And in so doing, we honor and we heal ourselves. We go back, all ye wounded spirits and souls. Go back, hold high in remembrance what sustained our ancestors. How can we do otherwise? We are the promises they made to themselves. We Are there dreams? How are you feeling? And where do we go from here? Where and what will be the leadership that we need? The leadership that will demand you of you, every possibility within you. So come, 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 let me tell you a story. I would hear my grandmother call when I seemed in need. Each story, no matter its filigree, would have the same moral, the same reason for being, to share her philosophy of life. All things are one, said my grandma. In this world, everything is related. All things are one. In this world, said my grandfather too, let no one contaminate your mind. Come, 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 please tell us your story that we may know our story. And when in years to come, a future generation, a future gathering of extraordinary men and women like those of you assembled here today in our name, when that happens, for that future assemblage to gather in celebration of you, the task is yours right now to ensure that they will know you, that the you that is the fulfillment of every person, every spirit, determined to, as African Americans say, make a way out of no way for yourself, for others. Sheroes and heroes of the Freedom Trail, good morning. Come, 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 let me tell you a story of the history, the herstory that has brought us together this day. 57 years and 5 months ago, August 28th, 1963, I was on a bus headed to the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. The night before, my aunt put the finishing touches on a pink and white gingham sundress, albeit a sophisticated one for our design friends here, specially made for that momentous day. With it was a matching scarf I'd tie over a twist of braids as long and thick as questions of race. My mom and I left our home in the Bronx at 3 a.m. for the drive to Harlem, where we parked our car, then boarded a chartered bus for DC that Wednesday morning. An organizer welcomed us, inducting us for the trip ahead. It would be a day, he said, from which there would be no turning back. Within hours, I knew why my parents had always resisted venturing south by car or bus. Traveling by train, we'd sped past the blood-soaked soil of the South, Maryland and Delaware in particular, past signs marked colored and white, past trees sagged low by the strange fruit of the lynched. By train, we'd bypassed the pain for the promises of Washington's architecture evokes, monuments to American freedoms built by Africans enslaved, and indeed Africans enslaved did build the Capitol of the United States and the White House. Clearly, this was not my first bout with racism, but that bus ride south was my first time violently denied a restroom or food we could afford to buy. It was my first time to be stormed by screaming white hordes. It was my first time to see chaos erupt as sheriff's deputies stood idly by, and that is the feeling that we had on January 6th. We saw chaos erupt as the government that should have been represented by soldiers in operation, we feel that a stand down order was given that day. In those Take America Back 2 days of 1963, we on the bus were outside agitators, disrupting their way of life. The screamers were Americans, citizens defending their rights. Isn't it amazing how that language was brought back? We, said they, were the troublemakers. It was 1963. The freedom rides were current events then, not history. Those who attacked our bus on that Delaware-Maryland border, that infamous Mason-Dixon line, rocking it from side to side, intended no lullaby. Lumbering into Washington just before 11, our bus had emerged from the raging flames of hatred, underscoring the need for the march, underscoring the need for this event today. And it released us into a swarm of a cheering throng. That is what you today represent to me as we gather. So embraced, we in turn welcomed the next bus. They then cheered the group after them, and on and on. How we got over. My soul looks back in wonder how we got over. Journeying from that up south or down north, we traveled a treacherous route, fought the same demons, and somehow we made it through. School desegregation for me had been a lonely affair, just one of 4 little foot soldiers for justice against an army of unapologetic evil I'd been. Getting off that bus in Washington, I came to a mighty awakening. I was not alone. We are not alone. By bus, by train, by plane, by people of every hue kept coming, some on foot, walked hundreds of miles to that day. For hours, speakers and singers, drum majors all kept a steady beat until the time finally came for Dr. King to ascend the podium. His familiar baritone tuned like none other, he soothed us, he rallied us, commended us to heights untold. When he raised his hand over the crowd, invoking his dream, I felt myself levitate, soar. One among 250,000 united, I understood the movement, the potential for human rights worldwide as never before. I'd begun the day an innocent in braids and a brand new sundress of pink and white. I would never wear that dress again or my hair like that in those braids. Little wonder, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover called Nobel Peace Prize laureate Dr. King the most dangerous man in America. We were all dangerous that day. It was dangerous to threaten enforced doctrines of white supremacy, dangerous to meet the demon face to face, yet keep on keeping on our chartered route. That was the promise and the premise of the civil rights movement, the promise of hashtag Black Lives Matter today. Yet still today, I remember Dr. King and the dream and the vow he made that March on Washington Day. He said, "We will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream." And that is our hope. My grandfather took his daughters to march against lynching. My mother took me to the March on Washington. My daughter took my granddaughter to march for Trayvon Martin. As a people, we take our children where we must, so nurtured, fortified by the dream and the vow. We tend trickling waters in preparation for the stream. Thank you, Dr. King. Thank you to all those who nurtured me with their wisdom and their love. That was the power and passion poured into me and tended for the journey to this day. So what are we going to do about all of this? We who think, act, dare, dream better days today. Sankofa, go back to go forward. To move forward, we must understand the past so as to chart our route to the future. Go back to our truths. Go back to the lessons of our foremothers who led the way and those walking the walk. How are you tending your legacy for tomorrow? I think of a friend of mine, Joan Shigakawa, who knows the betrayal of World War II era Japanese Americans firsthand. As a 6-year-old, Joan was imprisoned along with her family. A film and television producer, her later work as a senior executive at the Rockefeller Foundation led her to the Obama administration, where she served as acting chair of the National Endowment for the Arts. There is power in the telling of our stories and power in the knowing and sharing of our stories. Thank you, Joan. The story we tell becomes the world we live in, says writer-commentator Catherine Orenstein. The story that inspired her leadership as problem solving was the lack of women's voices in the nation's editorial pages. Now her company, the Op-Ed Project, scouts and trains underrepresented experts to take thought leadership positions in their field through op-eds and much more, to write and publish the stories that will change our national discourse. To our knowledge keepers and educational systems, librarians, teachers worldwide, because of your work, more and more reader thinkers will know of what they speak. Thank you. Frederick Douglass, our venerated elder in America, ancestor in America, wanted a birthday. With all his accomplishments, self-emancipated slave, Underground Railroad conductor, publisher, Civil War strategist, ambassador, it was a small thing to ask. He could not ask his father slave owner from whom he'd escaped, though. And he could not ask his mother. She had been sold away when he was 5. But he could remember her words. In the little time they had together, she'd said he'd been born in Maryland in the teens. And so for his birth year, he chose the mid-teens, 1818. She always called him her little Valentine. And so for his birth date, he chose Valentine's Day, February 14th. Next week, as the celebration of Black History Month begins, let us thank Carter G. Woodson for remembering Frederick Douglass. In 1926, Woodson created Negro History Week and chose to cite it in February to honor Harriet Bailey's Little Valentine. How fitting that Black History Month not only inspires us, but then inspired Women's History Month that follows. And so to those of you who teach, tend, nurture, make healthful policy for our children, because of your remembrance of Harriet Bailey and her little Valentine, there will be no such thing as a parent, a person with nothing to give, or a child with no potential. Thank you. Go back in commemoration, go back in celebration, go back to our beginnings, to the indigenous experience, and write a chronicler, Mourning Dove. By day, she was a migrant worker. By night, she was a prolific writer and political voice. To those of our first responders, our everyday workers, thank you for keeping us safe in her name, for restoring us to health and keeping our families whole when you could. In you is the greatness of every man and every woman. Thank you. And if I could only, as I go on here, if I could only thank each and every one of you personally today for all that you do and have done and will do for our greater good. But instead, let's do this. I'm going to ask each of you to speak the name of someone who's made an amazing difference in your life. Speak that name and say thank you. In that is our hope. Confronting my history changed my life. Coming to grips with it started a whole new life for me. And now, in fulfilling the promise this 10-year-old girl made to Dr. King, that I would take his gift of spirit and share it with you. Since then, as I have come to know, I share this with you. We, as African Americans, we've been demeaned as slaves, as though the shame of those who would enslave us could take the measure of our lives. We've been segregated as less than, as though the blindness of those who would mock us could share the vision of all we survey. We have known the depths of despair, and yet we have lifted ourselves up through the legacy of our past and the promise of our future. O ye sons and daughters of Africa, congratulations. O ye sons and daughters of the indigenous nations, of South and Latin America, of Asia, of Africa, of every race, ability, gender identity, faith, and imagination, congratulations. Do you know what a mighty people we are? This little light of mine, I say to you, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, we must each say to ourselves, we're gonna let it shine. And sing it with me, please, in your own space and in your own voice. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. I see some of you singing, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I thank you for being with me today and for allowing me to join you. Thank you.